energy ministers have reached a deal on making emergency gas cuts this winter. Europe is facing an energy crisis as the Russian-owned firm Gazprom reduces supplies through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to 20% of its capacity, half of what it was in June. Russia says the disruption is due to maintenance issues and sanctions. Arriving at the meeting, the EU Energy Commissioner said the move is politically motivated.
Good morning. We will discuss today the EU's preparedness for the upcoming winter. Yesterday's announcements by Gazprom underline once again that we have to be ready for the possible supply cuts from Russia at any moment. And to be ready for that, we have to act right now. We have to take care of our preparedness. We have to tackle this crisis right now and together. And by doing so, we will reduce our demand preemptively. That allows us to continue the filling of our underground gas storage, which is right now at 66%. But this also allows us to reduce future gap between supply and demand.
Well, to help make sense of the EU energy crisis, we can cross to London and join Arise Business correspondent Laurie Laird. Good to see you, Laurie. So they've reached agreement on gas demand reduction, but gas demand reduction is not necessarily finding an alternative to Russian gas, is it?
That's right. Although agreeing to cut consumption really is a very, very good first start, Charles. And this is something that I think some governments have not been candid with their people about. The EU has probably been the most candid with its electorate, or electorates is sort of a tough word in a union of so many countries, but they have been candid with consumers about the need to cut consumption. We really haven't heard that kind of a debate start in the US or the UK. And some cutbacks are fairly stringent. French civil servants have been told that they may not turn on the heating when the weather gets colder unless the temperature drops below 19 degrees, and they may not use air conditioning unless the temperature is above 26 degrees. So for people in Europe who are not used to the same sorts of temperatures that you're used to in Abuja, it will feel very, very warm before they can use that air conditioning. It's only one sector of the economy, but it does show that European leaders and the Commission itself are being candid with people and saying, we may not have enough fuel. We're going to have to do some things now. Now, coming to agreement was almost unanimous. Hungary dissented, and that is not a surprise. But I think the next question will be, this is voluntary. What happens when if the EU decides to make these cuts mandatory?
Well, absolutely. And we're seeing the EU also looking at alternative sources of energy, Laurie. Nigeria is one that's been mentioned, for example. How credible is that as a replacement for Russian gas? I think Norway and Azerbaijan were also mentioned.
That's right, Charles. And it's looking a little bit more credible than it did a couple of months ago. You and I we sat in a studio and said, Germany is saying that it would like to cut its reliance on Russian gas from 50% of the gas mix to 30% of the gas mix. It's almost got there. So some of the substitution that I thought was very, very unlikely to happen this quickly has in fact happened. Again, Germany, 35% of its gas is now coming from Russia, down from about 55% not that long ago. So this transformation is coming rather quickly. But as this transformation continues, marginal gains are going to become much, much more difficult to find. You're right when you mentioned that Nigeria has a great deal of gas. So do other countries in Africa. But the problem is always getting that gas. How do you transport that gas to the places that need it the most? Now, Germany in particular, has become so reliant, or had become so reliant on Russian gas coming in through a pipeline. Germany has no regasification facilities facilities on German soil. So that means they're reliant on stuff coming from a pipeline. So the sorts of things that Nigeria has available to sell, which is liquefied natural gas that can be put super chilled and put into a cargo ship and sent to places that need it. Germany at the moment has no way, and this is the case with a number of other European countries, they have no way to turn that super chilled gas into something they can use. So there still is quite a bit of infrastructure transformation that has to happen for Europe to really cut back on Russian gas. But again, the direction of travel has been fairly impressive.
Nevertheless, in the immediate term, I mean, it is summer in the European continent at the moment. Is there enough gas to get European households and industries through the summer months?
At the moment, it looks okay. At the moment, what some countries are doing is not saying we have a shortage right now, but what we're very, very worried about is shortages when the weather does get cold during the European winter. Although, if you'll allow me to digress, when we had those heat waves in Britain last week, when the temperature, the mercury went above 40 degrees, a record high in Britain, there was a neighborhood in southeast London that came very, very close to a blackout because gas wasn't available. The UK had to pay some exorbitant prices to get Belgian gas shipped into this particular neighborhood. So we will potentially see localized shortages, but that's less likely than seeing shortages come winter when we're using so much more gas. What the European countries are trying to do now is to fill their storage facilities, which are roughly, as we heard in that quote, about 2/3 full. European Commission is recommending that all countries go for 80% capacity in storage, with Russia really turning down the taps. It will be very, very difficult to store up that capacity, to store up those stocks for a winter.
But I mean, Laurie, what about public opinion about this? Are people prepared to take a cut in temperatures and to go through some hardship just to stop this dependency and these political games? I mean, is public opinion in favor of continuing a hard policy towards Russia at the risk of losing its gas?
Charles, I think this is such an important question, and it isn't a question that people are really asking, and I think it will become an ever more important question. When Russia first invaded Ukraine, the shock was such that I think public support across the globe was there. It was there to sanction Russia. Perhaps we felt like we were able to make sacrifices. We may feel that we're able to make those sacrifices now when we're having a very warm European summer. But when it gets cold, when people are still paying very, very high prices to fill up their car tanks with motoring fuel, it is very difficult to see public opinion continuing to penalize Russia in the sake of supporting Ukraine. And nowhere is this becoming more clear than in the US, where Americans have become so very used to paying very, very low prices for petrol, for gasoline, for motoring fuel. They're not used to paying high prices, and we are seeing some of that bipartisan consensus in penalizing Russia amongst U.S. lawmakers. We're seeing that ebb a little bit as elections get closer, midterm elections, and people get very, very frustrated about the high prices of gasoline.